There are certain courtesies that locksmiths should have with their customers, like cleaning up after themselves. But there are also a number of courtesies that customers should have with their locksmiths, like answering the phone. Jeff Moss, Handsome Tim Coleman, and myself, Tyler J. Thomas, will discuss, piss, and moan about all aspects to these points. And yes, we all make keys. This is the Three Tumblers. When any of us call to have a service person come to fix something in our house, such as plumbing or an air conditioner, we expect them to be polite and get the job done. But what do they expect from us as customers in return? They're not got a lot of points here, but the first one, I guess, starting off with is parking. Residential is not always a problem unless you're deep in a city. Commercial's generally pretty good, except hectic places with small loading docks that are always filled, stuff like that. It goes a long way. If parking is not going to be convenient, the customer, commercial, residential, should at least give you the heads up. Jeff, I know you're not out in a service vehicle a lot, but do you ever hear sort of these nitpicks from your techs when they come in talking about, oh, it was bitch finding parking or something like that?
Oh yeah, all the time. Going downtown, parking truck zones, having to pay for parking with quarters, loading dock access, places having weird rules and hours you can get in. Condominiums only want work done within certain time because heaven forbid somebody should see somebody with a pair of tools. So yes, I hear about it all the time.
That's a good point. Something I forgot. Paying to park, especially when you have to park on a street. Tim, do they have that up there where you are? The reason I asked, because in Atlanta, it's all gone cashless. So every parking kiosk you can only take it with a debit or credit card, which I love. But do y'all have that?
Yeah, in uptown Charlotte, we've got a lot of that actually, and that's why we all on the road have a company credit card that we can use. And yes, we add that to the invoice. I mean, we charge for that because if I got to spend $7 to park, then I'm not spending $7 to park and go off and have fun. I'm spending it to be there for you.
Do you itemize that on the invoice, or you just like add it to labor?
No, we itemize it. We actually have a line item for that.
Yeah, I mean it isn't an everyday thing, but it does happen. My gripe is more people parking in the fire lane in front of our shop where it clearly says no parking. But that's for a different subject and different section.
Yeah, we get Jeff, I know you know, and I think Tim knows as well, but our service vehicle is a Mini Cooper Clubman. And as much as we get harped on for it, it can navigate any parking deck, any loading dock, anywhere. I mean, it's a compact. So the height clearances, all that stuff, as far as Jeff said, people mistaking it for a service vehicle, they don't want anybody there. Well, to them, it just looks like any other vehicle. So, it's tiny, but it does have its perks.
So you can't haul an 8-foot ladder in that service vehicle.
I haven't tried, but it does have a roof rack. I'd be worried if we needed an 8-foot ladder. Something's gone wrong.
Well, I mean, I'll also say, as far as parking goes, our shop is located around a couple small towns, and parking for residential is, quite honestly, it's a bitch. And there's some streets where you have to park on the street, and I've had to walk almost a block and a half, 2 blocks down to get to the service location. So, let us know ahead of time. Like when you call, say, hey, you're going to have to park probably a block and a half away to get here, something like that. Or if the driveway is hidden, because there's a lot of hidden driveways because of how close the houses are, let us know where your driveway is.
Yeah. And actual decent directions to get there is always helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, especially in an oddball, like a new subdivision that maybe is not on Google Maps or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of space, let's migrate from parking to workspace. There's, I guess, two ways you can go about this. Obviously, residential and commercial. With residential, you want an open work area. You don't want to go into like a hoarder's house and be bending and twisting and fighting over stuff just to pull a lock off a door. In commercial, you don't run into it often, but sometimes you do. And again, it's just the expectation as the service provider that you need area and room to work. Uh, Tim, you do a lot of residential, more than both of us. Have you ever run into a situation where you just dreaded doing the work, or you just flat out told them, "Hey, this isn't acceptable. I can't work like this"?
I mean, actually, I get away with doing more commercial than I do residential, but yes, I have been on those residential jobs where it's like, hey, we need everything rekeyed. Or one that I can remember is, a few months after first started, and there was a detached garage from the house, and it was all overgrown, and one of the doors had like some sort of bush or tree or whatever grown right up against it. And I was in there with spiders and everything else. And I came out of that job saying, look, next time I see that, you're going to have to prune the bushes before I get in there. But yeah, I mean, you just have to look at the situation and say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, if you ever encountered anything like that.
Not really, just there's a few hoarder houses that have been put on the do not ever service list.
Well, what about when they has somebody ever brought in a car that was just filled so much with garbage and trash, and it's like, I don't want to touch this.
Thankfully, no. I mean, I've seen them, pictures and stuff, but no, because people have a little bit of sense.
I think I know what you're talking about. I've seen a few on the Facebook groups, and it's like, I made a key to this car, and it's just everything but.
Yeah, I mean, the one for me that, hey, I go to plug the OBD connector in and there's a gun sitting on the floor, that I don't like for various reasons. But the car is really gross and there's like needles or shit sitting there. I would not go in, I would say, hey, you got to clean your car out. But luckily that has not happened.
I'll give y'all a little cop secret. If I see a car that's piled with trash and everything else, like up to the windowsills, I'm not going to search it. I never did.
You've said that before.
Yeah, and I'll say it again. And the same is true with locksmithing. Of course, I don't do automotive, but yeah.
I was going to say, that's a good point. I mean, we're talking about tangible stuff in the way, but what about areas or workspaces that are just disgusting? It doesn't have to be a car. I mean, we've seen houses and businesses, vacants, hadn't been worked on in forever, mildew smell, mold all over the walls, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy for me in the shop to say just refuse and leave, because that's what I would do. Call the boss and say, hey, this isn't safe for me to work on. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to go into an abandoned one?
A couple, but they've not been bad, actually. As long as I've got room to work and there's not like needles or used condoms or shit laying around on the floor, then I'm okay with it. That might be just due to my professional background, but yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, I can't recall ever being so well. I recall being weirded out and grossed out, but not to the point where it's like, I'm not touching this. All right, so we've talked about parking space. We've talked about workspace. Let's talk about personal space. So well, number one, when you're there on site, you want the customer to remain on site with you. You don't want them to meet you on the site and then, okay, well, I'm going to go run some errands. I'll be back in 20, 30 minutes. I mean, that's just a huge liability issue. But at the same time, you don't want them hovering over your shoulder. I mean, I don't mind it if they're just standing nearby talking to me, but when you get involved with drilling, I remember one time I had to tell a customer to back off a little bit when we were mortising a door from scratch, just because that you fuck that up, you fuck the door up, it's over, and you got chips and everything where the tool itself is already big enough. Tim, you ever encountered somebody where you just had to say, hey, give me some space here. I mean, this isn't a joke right now. I got to be focused on this, and could be unsafe to you.
Uh, with doing some work, sort of, but more so doing quotes. Whenever I remember a commercial customer asked me to come out and do a quote for a few repairs on his building. And every time I would go up and try to touch the door to see what was going on with it, he would give me about 2 seconds to touch it. And then he would get in there and just push the door and shake it and rattle stuff. And I'm like, look, I need to see it. And he's like, yeah, you can see it. And then I would try again, and he would just grab it mid close or whatever and just shake it and pull stuff and yank on stuff. And I'm like, look, I can't give you a quote. You're just all up in my shit, and I can't tell what's going on with the damn door. So no, I'm not giving you a quote. But as far as like residential stuff, you kind of have to have that asshole edge sometimes, to where even if you're a personable person, you have to give off that air of assholedness, just to get the customer to back up a little bit and give you some space. Let me work. And sometimes you can do that like without saying anything. You can just literally not say anything, and they'll kind of shut up and walk off a little bit, but not so much other than quoting for stuff.
We had a guy when I worked at a different hardware store, and all the screen and window repair, there was just a bench in the back of the store, and some customer walks up and he's got like a propane torch in his face practically, because the guy's working on a wood window and the torch is sitting there. The customer's not paying attention. He just walks up and starts, talking to the guy while he's working, and he could have gotten his face burned off. Like, you got to pay attention to what's going on around you.
Does it bother either of y'all, especially, I mean, this applies to you too, Jeff, but Tim, for example, when you're picking open a lockout, something like that, or Jeff, when you're doing work on a vehicle, does it bother you when somebody's right there, with you, maybe not interfering or close enough, but just watching you? Does it bother you at all?
Sometimes it does. I mean, it seems like locks always pick open easier when there's nobody watching, but I think it's more difficult when you encounter a lock that is not picking for you, that should pick for you, like a Schlage or a Quickset or whatever, and you should have it open fairly quickly, and they're standing there watching you, and it just kind of makes you cringe whenever you're picking a Quickset or trying to pick a Quickset, and they say, man, that must be a really, really good lock. It's taking you forever to get in there. And you're like, no, fuck you.
Or they say, it's not like in the movies, huh?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, Jeff? That's normally why we have people wait in the shop. It's easier. If with rekeys and stuff, try to always have people leave it. The one person that wants to wait, it always comes back to bite you. And I'm often reminded of that as I'm rushing to try to get something done and 27 other things happen. It's like, people aren't that important that they can't just leave it. And that's it. If they don't want to do it, then if they can't leave it, then I don't know. I guess you got to go somewhere else. And there ain't really anywhere else to go.
Yeah, the guy at Scotty at our shop that we worked at the previous company together, and he was a service technician as well on the road, and he absolutely hated it. I guess still does. He just needed his space. I'll come get you when it's open. I'm not going to swing the door when it's unlocked. I'll get you. We'll go in together.
Yeah.
But you got to go away. Any final points,
Agreed.
Gentlemen?
It's kind of the same thought, like when somebody brings in some sort of locking container. And I know we're going to talk about this in future episodes, but that's something that you just take away from the view of the customer, not just to protect techniques and methods of opening, but when you, like Jeff said, when you run into the 47 different things that can go wrong, they will all go wrong when you're trying to do it in the view of a customer.
Yeah. It's kind of you gotta balance it out, because at the same time you don't want to be accused of opening the door and looking in there before or without them there, but at the same time you don't necessarily want them, staring at you. While we might tell you to shoo away on a job, we really would like you to stick around for Tim and how he thinks the job starts before the job even starts.
Conversation is the key, pun intended, to our everyday lives. From reading the menu before ordering at the drive-thru, one of my pet peeves, to expressing what our end goals are, we have to talk with each other. When you, a customer, calls me, a locksmith, there are things you want to know and things I need to know. Also, there are things I expect from you on the day that I made time to solve your problem. If you're a customer and you call for service, you should expect to be asked questions about what's wrong. Maybe try some things out. Some simple diagnostics over the phone can help you out. And you shouldn't really get pissed off over that. A lot of what we do starts over the telephone. And in a future episode, we will be covering this as far as dispatching. But for the purposes of this episode, customers need to know that you will be asked questions. We don't just say, hey, okay, we'll be there tomorrow at 3 or next week at 9 or whatever. Tyler, you're kind of unique as compared to Jeff and I. When you have a brand new customer call you and ask you for services, what are some of the things that you ask and expect to be able to know out of that customer?
Well, I'll give you a good example. Actually happened today. Potential customer from the Middle East sent me some messages asking for me to source some locks. And, I just, asked, what are you trying to accomplish? It was Medico related, and they were referred to me for Medico. And, what are you trying to accomplish? What do you exactly need done? Because ultimately in this example, it's number one, am I even able to help you? Are these keyways I have access to? Are they keyways I should be touching? Things like that. So, yeah, I'm unique in the sense that, am I even able to touch these things? Am I going to run afoul with Medico or Sergeant with a degree system or Schleg with an Everest system, something like that? So, yeah. And most of the time they're pretty receptive to that, especially when I explain it to them. And oftentimes, thankfully to the efforts of Jeff and I and stuff we're working on behind the scenes, I don't have the answer or I don't have the solution and I can't service it, but I can send them to somebody who does, and they're very receptive to that, very thankful.
Yeah, we kind of do the same thing. If we get a customer that comes in with a Medico key or a multi-lock key and it's not one of ours, we can say, hey, look at this number, call these people up and go to them. Jeff, how about you? Like, you're in the shop a lot more than I'm in our shop. What information do you expect customers to be willing to provide you with?
I mean, obviously knowing what the problem is, what color is the lock, which way does the door swing? What key is supposed to work? I mean, anything, just basic stuff. A lot of times people it doesn't work. Well, what doesn't work? I don't know. Come figure it out.
Yeah, we get some of that too. But having customers text us pictures or email us pictures really, really does kind of help.
I can't wait for that.
For sure. But then there's some people that can barely even operate a phone, and it's like, you need to come back with pictures. I'm not going to guess.
I can't wait for the dispatch episode, because I did that solely for like 2 years, and I'm hearing what you guys are saying, and it's just reminding me of the tips and tricks I used to use to get the information out of people, but make them feel like being very helpful with it. Too, you got to make it feel like you're not harassing them or just beating a dead horse. You got to feel like, oh, I appreciate that. That really tells me what I need to know. And they're like, okay, well, there's this and that and the other, and you're like, great, I needed to know that too.
Well, when a customer says, when you ask, what kind of locks do you have, or does your current key go into every single lock? And they say yes. And you say, are there any numbers or markings or letters on your key? And they say, yeah, there's a 68 on there. You don't think, oh, you owe me one. No, you think that's the easy keys, SC1 blank. So yeah, I mean, some of that stuff. And yes, we will definitely have fun with the dispatch episode because, I did that for a decade total as a full-time career, not locksmithing dispatch. But so the next thing that I kind of want to talk about is something that happened several times to me this past week. When you're on your way to a customer, did either of you guys, Tyler, when you were working on the road, and Jeff, I know you're in the shop most of the time, but either of you guys, when you have an appointment and you have to go to somebody, do you always call before you actually get on the way?
I would say yes, 99% of the time.
Like for residential, we do 100% of the time. Commercial, we do maybe about 50% of the time, or personally, I do about 50% of the time. Tyler, if you call a customer because you're on the way or you're getting ready to be on the way, and they've called your shop a few times and it's the shop number that shows up when you call them, do you expect them to answer?
With this company, no, because it's commercial properties and there's multiple people that we know there, property managers, chief engineers, security in some examples. At the previous company I worked for, one of the previous companies, yeah, it was required for residential. And we told them, hey, 30 minutes before we're to show up, we will give you a courtesy call to let you know that we're on the way. If you do not pick up within that 30 minutes, or if 30 minutes elapses and we don't hear back from you, we're moving on to the next appointment, because we've got to have somebody there. Obviously, you can't just show up and, oh, I'm locked out, or, oh, I want my house rekeyed. Yeah, but you got to be there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of what we were talking about earlier, Tyler, in your block is, we want the customer to be there, and you can't just go off and run errands. And I've told customers that before, like, look, you need to stay here while I'm doing this work. Also, you need to be here. And I had a job scheduled earlier this week, and it was about 20 minutes northeast of Bumfuck in North Carolina. And I showed you guys a picture of the map where that job was. I won't say exactly where it was in North Carolina, but anyway, it was like an hour from the shop. And I called that customer about 15, 20 minutes before I was getting ready to leave, and they never answered. I called again like 10 minutes later. They never answered. I also texted both times. And then the third time I called, which was 10 minutes after I'd planned on leaving, the voicemail box was full, could not accept any messages. And I texted again. 2.5 hours later, that customer texted back and said, yes, I'm here. And I said, I'm sorry, we're going to have to reschedule you. And they were rather pissy about it. And I said, look, plans change at a moment's notice. Even if you confirmed yesterday, shit can happen today. I didn't say shit in the text message, just by the way. But stuff can, I should have. Anyway, but yeah, stuff changes. And so as a customer, you should listen. You should be active, you should expect, and you should respond.
Yeah.
Jeff, any thoughts?
No, agreed. It happens all the time. And then they call back, or they leave a Google review. They never called me back, or they never called me to schedule service. Like, what?
Yeah. I mean, we get that customer I was talking about actually was an Angie's List customer, which is the only advertising ish that we pay for. And so we have the entire trail of, the audit log of phone calls and text messages and everything to fight back if that person leaves a negative review. But I guess to wrap it all up, customers, yes, we need to do things for our customers, but also our customers need to do things for us. So if that's anything from answering simple questions all the way to just answering a phone call and being there while we're doing the work, don't treat us like, we're just somebody you can leave us with. No, that's not me.
Right. And then you don't have to chase them. If they leave, you got to chase somebody down to get paid or sign an invoice. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
annoying.
Yeah. The liability issue alone
Yeah.
is a huge one. If somebody leaves me at their house all by myself and say their dog gets out through the back door, or they can't find something after I've been there, then they're going to turn around and say, oh, well, you were there while I wasn't there. Bish, no, I told you to stay there and I told you I wasn't going to do any work. And at that point, I started billing by the hour.
No, for sure.
Are there any locksmiths that we know of that wear body cameras? Because I think that might be the next step one day.
Yeah, your buddy, I'm sure, with his tactical vest.
I'll have to ask him. I think that might be a worthy. I know a lot of them do dash cams for liability reasons. Yeah, I'll ask him. Anyway, I'm just thinking out loud.
Well, no, our trucks have front and rear view cameras that record constantly in a loop. I've thought about the whole body camera thing, but with our work shirts, it really wouldn't be, I don't know. It'd be kind of conspicuous.
Everything in our shop is audio and video recorded. I mean, there's 2 stickers that say, audio recording in use. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, everything in our shop is, but as far as in the field and going into people's houses or businesses, I think that's
they might not be happy with it now that I think about it.
They might not be, which is why I would want it to be very discreet. I'm not going to share it, but I don't want you to know that, I'm recording. I kind of want my backup.
Which is technically illegal in one-party states.
Yep, like ours.
And ours.
All right. He can explain it to you, but he can't understand it for you. Jeff's up next with Shop Etiquette.
Are you the kind of customer who takes 5 steps inside the grocery store and then starts asking employees if they sell lettuce there? Anyone who has worked retail knows those people and would really like to call them dipshits to their face. But should we do that as locksmiths? So the answer would be no, we are professionals. But every real locksmith can make keys, but not every key. So we have a lot of blanks. We don't have every blank. A professional can modify a blank to fit a lock, such as there are motorcycle blanks that work weird imported key switches. The guy at the hardware store is not going to take the time to file it and make it fit and, spend 20 minutes tracking down the right part and, calling suppliers and stuff like that. There are keys that come in all the time from other locksmiths that we don't have the blanks for. Are they no longer patented? And could you probably find a blank on the gray market or whatever to do that? Probably, but is it worth it? No. We're supposed to be professionals. We have ethics. We will copy a unpatented, unrestricted key that says do not duplicate, but there's no teeth to that. So personally, I don't see an issue. You're not skirting the patent or anything like that. There's no agreement. It's just stamped on the key. So there's really nothing preventing you from doing that. What do you guys think? I know you don't, Tyler, you're lucky. You don't really deal with customers in the shop, and Tim, you do sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what I'm taking from this point is, if a customer brings in something that is obviously restricted, like, a multi-lock 206 keyway, that's pretty common, right? But multi-lock should be restricted. You have signature cards, etc. So I'm going to explain that to the customer. Also, there are keys from certain overseas import locks, especially like we see a lot of cheap cash box keys and stuff like that. And they'll bring us a key blank, and we might have a few things that are close to it, but not quite it. And if the customer asks why we can't make it, I'm like, I explain to our customers. I say, look, we can't make this. It is an overseas import. We don't have blanks for it. You can try here, here, and here, and give them a few referrals, and maybe they can get something done. But I'm not going to spend the time and effort to try to get a specialized blank just so I can copy their key.
Or how about when they bring you a blank and it's obviously a steel blank and you're like, no, I'm not touching this. And they're like, well, why? They say it works. And you're like, no, I'm not wrecking my cutting wheel for it.
Yeah, yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I've done that a few times and had people get pissed off at me. And I tell them when they bring in a customer supplied blank, I say, look, I'll cut it as long as the magnet doesn't stick to it. And I take my magnet and the damn key jumps 30 yards across the shop to stick to it. And I'm like, yep, nope, you're not getting this blank cut here.
It's funny you say that because some of the Silca blanks that we get are steel. So we just cut them really slow and we don't have a problem. But if it's some car key that was like a high security GM and it was magnetic, we wouldn't cut that. That would kill the high security cutter.
I bet that sounds like hell when you cut a steel blank.
I'm sure. I don't even know if they make them, but cutting like a stainless steel Schlage L or something like that, you just got to go really slow.
The only steel blanks that I will cut are actually the 1137 ace keys because our cutter's designed for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it. It's just an end mill drill bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's safe.
So at what point do you get extremely direct with the customer? Should you actually tell them to fuck off? Well, if you don't own the business, I would say no, because you are a representative of somebody else and you shouldn't do that. There have been times, people come in, they never get off their cell phone. They're talking to somebody else where they're trying to deal with you. They're just downright rude. They want to argue about price. I'll go get my boss or somebody else and have them deal with it. I've told people off and gotten sort of chastised for it. And I get it because, whatever the case is, you got to be the professional, be the adult. We've been around for a long time and we have a reputation that we should be a good business. I mean, there are some customers that you don't want to deal with or you can't help them and you have to politely, tell them it's something you can't do. The people where everybody's breaking in and say, look, get an alarm, call the police. It's not something that we're equipped to deal with. And that usually satisfies them. So it depends on the situation, how you handle it. But I don't think that as an employee, you should be doing that. If you own the business, you can do whatever the hell you want. What do you think?
My boss actually comes and gets me sometimes when he doesn't want to deal with the customer and he's getting ready to tell him to fuck off. Just because I have the patience of an oak tree, and he will have me, call customers that are demanding and impatient, or customers that are upfront that he just doesn't want to deal with. And I have a very nice way of telling people where to go and what to do once they get there. But, that comes from, again, my professional background. And I think at some point you should be able to professionally tell somebody, no, we're not doing this for you. We can't do it for you. And this is why. If you give people a reason why, even if it's completely bullshit, as long as you give them a reason, that most people will accept that.
Yeah, I've never told a customer to fuck off, but I've told previous bosses to fuck off.
Yeah, I mean, we've fired customers. I don't say we, but my boss, they've certainly told people that their business was no longer desired.
I've done that twice this year, but I've been like matter of fact, respectful, professional about it, and saying, here's the reasons why. Um, Sent them their key records, sent them all their inventory we had on hand, and said, just this isn't feasible for us anymore. We wish you luck. And one of them acting appalled by it initially, but what it was is that they were new to the position or the property. They weren't aware of what had happened prior. So you send them a record of correspondence, written mail, certified mail, email, stuff like that, and you're just like, hey, we've been warning you about this for years. You haven't heeded our warning. We're going to cut ties with you, and just this isn't how we operate a business, and we don't want to do it anymore.
Well, basically, they didn't acquiesce to your nuances.
They did not. But, at the end of the day, it is sometimes satisfying to tell them, hey, fuck off. But in a very polite way. What is it? Churchill said, tact is telling somebody to go to hell and have them look forward to the journey.
Yes.
It's like that.
Yeah, and then they eventually they'll come back, with their tail between their legs and be on their best behavior because, they need something.
So we have a couple customers that are commercial customers like that we have tried to get them to fire us, and without success. We just keep pleasing everybody. But, at some point you do have to have a conversation and sit down with the customer and say, look, this is what I need from you. And in order for me to give you what you want from me. And I think as long as we communicate that and say, look, this is why, then, we should work out. And you know what? In the end of it, there's more work out there. There's too much work out there.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, why do we talk about customer bullshit on our days off? I want to talk about something else next. Tyler, get the spare parts.
I agree with Jeff. It's time to talk about something else. Tim, give us a spare part.
So my dirty little secret in life is that I enjoy watching Britain's Got Talent, and I'm excited that there's a new season beginning. And it's really difficult for us to watch Britain's Got Talent here in the U.S., but I'm looking forward to doing that later. So that's my spare part.
Hefe?
I'm meeting Al Borland in 2 weeks.
The real Al Borland.
Richard Karn is coming to Ohio. It's about 45 minutes away from me at a place called Hartville Hardware. They're doing a meet and greet. My buddy and I are going. It also happens to be his 40th birthday, and he's probably a bigger tool aficionado than I am.
He's older than 40.
No, it's my friend's 40th birthday.
Gotcha.
Do you plan on getting a picture with Al Borland?
Yes.
Oh, I'd like to see that. You could put that on the Twitter.
I don't think so, Tim.
No. My name's Tyler. Tim's over there. I don't have a spare part either, other than the weather's getting beautiful. It's getting outdoor season time, and I'm really looking forward to it because this has been the second wettest winter on record in Georgia, and it's been miserable because every other day it's rained.
Poor Tyler.
I know. As always, if you have any hate mail or love letters for us, write them on the back of a $20 bill and email it to the3tumblerspod@gmail.com or tag us on Twitter at @3tumblerspod. I am the executive producer, Tyler J. Thomas. Technical producer is Jeff Moss. Soon to meet Al Borland. Writer and editor is Tim Coleman. Our customer care representative is Haywood Jabuzzoff. Our director of country music is Stand By Your Man. And our chief legal counsel is Hugh Lewis Dewey of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe, otherwise known to victims of minor accidents everywhere as Huey, Louie, Dewey.
Need a nap.
Britain's Got Talent.
Need a beer. This has been a Three Tumblers production, Season 1, copyright 2023, all rights reserved. Find this episode and others wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, would you buzz off? What the fuck?